Back on TYT Sports, and now it's time to pay homage to those teams that are just potentially on the cusp of causing some problems this season in the Premier League. So we've done a Premier League preview where we touched on basically as many teams that are going to be fighting to head up the table, potentially win it as we possibly could. But now it's time to look at those teams that can potentially cause some upsets. And I think one team that deserves just as much media spotlight as all the big name teams in the top four, your Man Uniteds, Man Cities, Chelsea, Liverpool, Arsenal, is West Ham. I don't think that they have gotten anywhere enough media coverage that they deserve after a phenomenal last year. Keeping hold, what should be treated as a new signing of Dimitri Payet, was undoubtedly the biggest thing that West Ham could have done this season. I mean, moving away from Upton Park and now into the Olympic Stadium, the fans packed it. Nice rendition of Forever Blowing Bubbles going around. There's an aura. There's an aura around this club that a sense of belief that they can go on and obtain further success, because many people discarded their possibility of going on to great things last year. But this year, I definitely think that West Ham could be a team to cause an upset. Now, on the preview, I didn't mention them as much because I don't think top four is in their grasp this year of what I think, but it doesn't mean that they can't pose a question. It doesn't mean that they can't cause an upset. So looking at what they've done off-season, right? Now, last year, one of the biggest things about West Ham was keeping kind of squad depth in the midfield and trying to utilise Payet as much as possible. And I think that one thing that they wanted to add this year was adding some more attacking threats so that Payet can work with fellow attacking prospects. I think that one thing Payet proved in the Euro 2016 is that he doesn't just thrive in being in an environment where he's the main man. He can thrive along with players like Paul Pogba. He can thrive with players up top like Antoine Griezmann, who can move into his space and he can take more of a wider role. This guy is very versatile. He is talented beyond belief. And I think bringing in players like Feghouli, who we talked about from Valencia, I didn't mention him as much on the Elite 11 newcomers because I was just talking about so many other players, but here's your moment to shine, Feghouli. You are now coming in to a squad. You've got a large reputation from what you have accomplished at Valencia. You're now going to be working with one of the most talented footballers we've seen grace the Premier League in the last 4 or 5 years. And I think that working with those players up top in that attacking third, West Ham can be a dominant force. The only thing that I would have liked to have seen this year from West Ham is to bring in another striker. Now, there's rumours about Lacazette. There's still rumours about Mario Gomez. There's still rumours, Carlos Bacca even. What a signing that would be. But at the moment, their strengths still remain in their wider areas and utilising the talent of Dimitri Payet in there. Because you still get Payet, Feghouli, Torre, Lanzini, who was great on loan last season. He's got a permanent fixture now at the club. And then Enner Valencia as well, who's a talented wide player. But it's about Andy Carroll up top. I'm a big fan of Andy Carroll. Andy Carroll thrives when he's not the go-to. That is the bottom line. Andy Carroll can come on off the bench, but he can also start. He's always going to be a nuisance to defenders in the league. He's big, strong, dominant in the air. But there's something about that go-to striker that you just have to have that something else. When he went to Liverpool, I don't think he was given that kind of range of confidence that many people thought he could actually go on and be a success, similar to a lot of players that went to Liverpool, the Ricky Lamberts of the world, the Bentekes of the world that just don't seem to thrive in that environment. Luis Suarez goes and succeeds because he has got that X factor. He is that go-to. Same way that Aguero has at Manchester City. Same way that I think Zlatan will have at Manchester United. I would have liked to have seen West Ham maybe splash the cash on a Bacca or a Lacazette to just make them a very dominant force going forward. At the back, there's still some weaknesses there. But one thing that I have to say about West Ham is that they love to play to that underdog mentality. They love to be the team that's hard to beat, specifically at home. If they can make the Olympic Stadium a fortress like they did at Upton Park, they were always a dominant team, hard to break down, atmosphere incredible. I think that they will be good this year. I'm predicting that they definitely finish top 10. They definitely push for a Europa League spot, and they're going to be there or thereabouts to potentially push teams that fall by the wayside if they don't keep up to that level of quality to maybe make a stake at the Champions League. But moving over from West Ham, a team that I think, again, deserves some credit after a great season last year, is Watford. Sky Sports have their prediction that they're going to be in the top 10. One thing that has to be said about Watford is the new system that's coming in. All right, so they have Walter Mazzari coming in. This guy is so committed to a 3-5-2. This is what he looks to go and play. Now, there's been many managers that came into the Premier League committed to a 3-5-2, and they've soon been shunned of that expectation because the Premier League is not forgiving to a 3-5-2. If you leave your wide area susceptible, teams will punish you. But the thing about him is that he has bought players to try and make that scenario a success. Like bringing in Zuniga, the Colombian international, played for Napoli. He's got quite the engine on him. He could run up and down the park all day. He's talented on the ball. That's a player that you can bring in. One of the big signings who has already set himself up to succeed is the guy with that name, Isaac Success. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but that's how you spell it. Isaac Success from Granada. Now he comes along to potentially break the Ighalo and Troy Deeney partnership, which is held strong. Troy Deeney tipped to move elsewhere. He's kind of the heartbeat of that team, but at the moment he remains still within the club. Now, one thing that Paul Merson said about Watford, which I actually did like, not a lot of things about Paul Merson that he says I'm a big fan of, no discredit to him, but he actually stated this year that something that made sense is I put Watford in the bottom 6, but they could easily finish in the bottom 3, which is interesting. But what he says is that can Troy Deeney and Ighalo score the goals to keep Watford up for a second season in a row? Have the rest of the team got much to bring to the party? That is something that has to be said because it looks like they're strengthening for a new system. But last season, Troy Deeney and Ighalo's goals were so underrated. It's all about, can they maintain that success? Can they maintain that goal-scoring partnership? Can they continue to bring in vital goals? Because they did score vital goals last year to keep them at that level of success. I think that top 10 would immediately be a success for them. I think that survival is always going to be something that's in the rear-view window, that people are thinking, all right, it's not our immediate goal, but we have to keep an eye on it because that will always be tipped as a successful season for a team like Watford if they go on to survive. So I think this year, survival, they will survive. But I think that if they put a string of wins together and that partnership clicks, it could be a team to potentially break top 10. Now, another team that I tipped last season for potential success, and I did state one minor factual inaccuracy if it hasn't been cut out on the Premier League preview, is that Stoke, if they finish 9th this season, it will be their 4th consecutive season finishing 9th, not their 3rd. So Mark Hughes definitely knows how to install stability for Stoke. They are undoubtedly that team that is safe. They are safe. But should they be safe? No, because they have talent in that team. They brought in moving pieces last year that made my mouth water, thinking that the Stoke City, the team that many people feared to go away because it wasn't the best conditions and they were a dominant team in the air and they put in the hard tackles. Could they go on to potentially turn all that hard-working mentality into some sort of flair and be the well-rounded team that could go on and be the potential Leicester, even though back then we never knew what Leicester were, but could they be? So this season, Stoke fans are suffering a little bit of the Arsenal syndrome. They aren't moving enough in the transfer window, which is kind of funny because last season they moved a lot. They brought in Shaqiri, a guy that was not expected to be in a Stoke jersey. This is a guy that scored bangers from distance in the World Cup, a guy that had played his trade at Bayern Munich. He came to Stoke to join the likes of Bojan Krajcic, Arnautovic, it's in there as well. Poor man's Ibrahimovic just on looks alone. But they haven't done much, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that this team were starting to mould into their own. Yeah, they didn't finish as strong as they would have liked, and they had moments in the league where they were consistent. But when you finish 9th for 3 consecutive seasons in the Premier League amidst a league that just money is splashed around everywhere, how is that not considered a success? Yes, safe is fine, but Stoke never, ever seemed to fear relegation going by these last 3 seasons. Mark Hughes, a manager who hasn't always been a success, seems to install a level of confidence in Stoke that they can go on and potentially push further, because when you finish 9th for 3 seasons in a row, one thing that you're not worried about as much is relegation, and therefore the only way to go is up. And when you have players like Shaqiri, Arnautovic and Bojan in there with the dominant centre-back of Shawcross, who I think again is underrated at the back, you can go on to obtain further success. And they're my team, as they were last season, to potentially go forward and push for an 8th, 7th or 6th spot, even though that Sky Sports predictions and the Guardian's writers have them finishing at 10th, slipping one away. And then finally, I'm going to just wrap up some of the teams that have made some big acquisitions this season. Southampton, they had to make big acquisitions, not necessarily in the transfer department, but bringing in another manager, because Coleman, who just saved that sinking ship after they once again sold many of their big-name players, as they've consistently done. They're a great business model, but fans, I'm sure, are not too happy with the fact that they continuously sell some of their best players. As so this season, they sold Wanyama, I know very well, from Celtic. He moved over to play at Tottenham. Ronald Koeman, their manager, has moved over to Everton. Sadio Mane has joined Liverpool. And now they've got a coach in Claude Puel, who has kindly accepted a very, very difficult job to try and save this team. Once again, proved everyone wrong last year, that they can lose some of their best players, but they can still go on to prove people wrong. They finished 6th. That is a fantastic accomplishment last year. Fantastic. I stated, if you remember our last season Premier League preview clip, that they potentially could break top 4. I was on it with the Geordie. He kind of questioned my thoughts, but didn't discard it, because Southampton love to be the underdogs. They love to say, all right, we sold our best players. We bought in some new replacements. We can go on and surpass expectations. And one final team that I wanted to preview really quick, Everton, because Roberto Martinez has moved on, sacked from his position at Everton, and they have acquired the best possible acquisition that could return Goodison Park to be a field team, a hard team to beat, and that is Ronald Koeman. I just mentioned him there, leaving Southampton, worked wonders for a squad that really he had no right to do, because they, as I mentioned, lost a lot of their big-name players. He made positive acquisitions. He made acquisitions that would help keep them afloat. And now for Everton, he's not made the acquisitions that many people have wanted. And there still is time, by the way, because Stones has just left, which means there's an open vacancy in there at centre-back that I'm sure he'll be looking to fill. Bringing in Stecklenburg from Fulham wasn't exactly a glorious signing. It's going to have the name on the back of the shirt because it's a long name to spell, and he's not exactly a glorious figure. But he brought in Guaye as well from Aston Villa, a signing that many people have raved about. But the fact is that he's in charge, because Everton on paper have a good squad. Keeping hold of Romelu Lukaku at the moment, Chelsea still circling the pond, is going to be crucial for Everton going on to next season. They're one of the few squads in the Premier League, similar to Stoke, where I don't think they necessarily had to add as many positions as people thought. Because, yeah, when the team doesn't succeed, it's a go-to in the Premier League from fans and media to be like, oh, they need to bring in new faces. They need to change things up. Hence why Jose Mourinho was sacked merely a year after winning the Premier League, because people need change if things aren't necessarily going to plan. But one big change that has happened here is Roberto Martinez has moved away. His patient style of football wasn't working as much at Everton. They need a manager that knows how to work in adverse situations. Ronald Koeman is that manager. I'm surprised that teams of the bigger stature, maybe Arsenal next season, will be keeping an eye on Ronald Koeman if Wenger is to move on, because the guy deserves to be considered as one of the best managers in the Premier League for what he has done for Southampton. And him coming in this year, keeping a hold of Lukaku, maybe forming a new system at the back, making them harder to beat. He brought in Virgil van Dijk from Celtic to Southampton. He just likes to go to Celtic and steal all of our best players. Maybe he'll be looking at a player of similar stature. I'm not saying that Van Dijk would move. I think that would be very harsh on Southampton fans. But he's the biggest acquisition, as I've mentioned along the lines of this transfer window in the Premier League. I'm not going to focus so much on all the new players that are coming in, because we've yet to really see them evolve, and I will touch on them as the season goes on. But I love the change in managers this year, because it's so interesting to me how managers are considered the big signings. Guardiola is the bigger name than anyone that Manchester City have brought in. Jose Mourinho somehow is still the biggest name, I think, that Manchester United have brought in, even though Zlatan and Pogba come in with the ridiculous expectations that they have. But managers are changing. We have managers taking up different roles that many people wouldn't have expected. Southampton was 6th last year. Everton further down the table. Roberto Martinez had a catastrophic closing few months there. What made him make that decision? Because he thinks they're a bigger club and he thinks he can obviously turn them around to success. I think Everton will finish in the top 10 this year. I think they will be going back to the days where they were the team that was pushing their close rivals, Liverpool, surpassing them at times, pushing all the other teams in the Premier League. And apart from that, those are the teams that I think you should keep an eye on this year, one way or another. And we probably will do some clips as the season moves on and teams that are struggling. But bear with me. I'm a one-man marching band. Jason Rubin will be here to document the Premier League as we go forward. But these are the teams that I thought deserved a little mention as we go forward into the Premier League season. It's coming up this weekend. I can't wait for it. We've given you a preview. We're giving you teams to look out for. We're going to give you recaps. I'm going to throw my paper at the screen. Hit me up on Twitter, Francis_Maxwell. And I will see you guys very soon.